Hello guys, and welcome to my comparison reviews of the Sony WH-1000Xm3 and the Bowers & Wilkins PX. So, starting off, we're going to start with the comfort, and I would give the nod to the Sonys, kind of like a no-brainer here in terms of the comfort. The pads are, I feel like they're softer, as well as the opening for your ears to sit in. It's a lot roomier than the PX, as well as the weight of the headphone. So you really kind of get a nice sort of pillowy effect when using the Sonys. Sony did a great job in terms of upgrading the comfort in comparison to its predecessors. The PX, in comparison, though well built, it's a very well built headphone. The downside is that it is using such high quality materials. The aluminum build does add to the weight of these headphones, as well as the fact that the ear pads are a bit stiffer in comparison to the Sonys, and the opening is not as wide as the Sonys as a result. But it is pretty roomy when you get your ears in there. It doesn't really touch any of the components inside, but overall comfort is pretty decent at best with the PX, but after about a certain amount of time, it really depends on the user, but it's gonna happen. You're gonna feel some fatigue from the weight of this headphone. Moving over to the active noise canceling performance, and the Sony W1000Xm3 is a landslide victory in this category. As of now, there's no other headphone that I can really come to think of that is on par with what Sony has to offer. The closest would be probably the Bose Quiet Comfort 35 Mark IIs. But the Sony is in its own league in terms of deadening your environmental noises, not only in the low frequencies, but also the mid-range and upper frequencies. You put these on and it is literally like you just shut the whole world off. It's amazing how effective the noise cancellation is on the Sony, as well as the fact that despite such strong noise cancellation, there is no background hisses from the electronics and the processing. With the PX, the active noise cancellation performance is kind of a controversial sort of affair. So if you choose the flight mode, which you can select within the application for the PX, you will get the best performing active noise cancellation from the headphone. But despite the effectiveness being quite good and the level of noise that you get from the circuitry, like any hiss and stuff of that nature, is pretty much kept to a minimal asset, I would say that the sound quality that comes from the flight mode is quite mediocre at best. It sort of sounds like you're listening through a tunnel. There's no dynamics. It sounds pretty monotone and restrained. So in order to get the sound quality that the PX is kind of really capable of, you're kind of forced to set the active noise cancellation to either off or to the office setting, and then reduce the voice meter, which allows the microphones to pick up any ambient voice, to 0. So that will create a sort of like active noise cancellation profile for the office setting, and as a result, the sound quality on the PX is pretty much what they're most capable of. So overall, the Sonys take the cake immediately, and it's not really much of a comparison. The Sonys have the best active noise cancellation, and the sound quality is unchanged, while the PX, with its best active noise cancellation enabled, is still not as good as the Sonys and also destroys the sound quality. So you're stuck using a kind of like mediocre active noise cancellation setting to get the most sound quality out of the PX. Moving over to the battery life, the Sonys are superior. You get about 30 hours of Bluetooth and active noise cancellation use. You can recharge this in 10 minutes by plugging it into a wall adapter via USB-C and get about 5 hours of usage. The PX will give you about 18 to 20 hours of usage. It takes about 2 to 3 hours to recharge. There's no quick charging that I know of. So battery life is pretty much easily go into the Sonys. They both, however, can be plugged in via 3.5 millimeter input to power them passively. And the cool thing that the PX does that the Sonys do not do is it can retrieve a digital signal from the USB-C input, and you can get pure digital audio from your source directly into the headphones. I believe that's probably one of the best ways of getting sound to the headphones. So the USB-C port on the Sonys does not allow audio to transport. It's just for charging purposes. Now let's talk about the build quality and the design. Subjectively speaking, I do like the way the Sonys look. They improve the footprint on your head in comparison to the predecessor. These are much sleeker to wear. The PX is a bit more bigger and sticks out from your head. So in terms of the footprint and design while on your head, I would probably give it to the Sonys, but in terms of the design overall, I would give it to the PX. I feel like these just look stunning. It's very elegant, as you can see the way the light just glistens off the Bowers and Wilkins logo. This is a very elegantly designed, sophisticated headphone. The material is clearly just screen premium. It's kind of like a ballistic nylon mesh here. You have actual authentic leather in the headbands and the ear cups. And also the ear cups can easily detach magnetically for easy replacement, and they just snap right back on. So the design language for the PX is definitely superior, in my opinion, to the Sonys, from the build quality to the overall design. It's just a beautiful headphone to look at. Sonys still pretty well built, but the materials, as you can see, is plastic. It doesn't really compare to the PX in terms of that flair and that premium design aesthetic. Build quality, I would probably say PX definitely takes the cake on that. Sony is still pretty well built, but it's of course a plastic. In terms of the looks on the head, Sony is, I would say, a better looking headphone on the head. But overall, I would probably kind of rank it a tie because of the way they kind of like meet the middle in terms of the looks on your head as opposed to the overall look of the headphone themselves. Moving on to the features, and the Sonys are going to take the cake on that one. You have the touch gesture interface here, which is great for, skipping between your tracks, manipulating phone calls, summoning your voice assistant, raising and lowering the volume. You also have the ability to use an optimizer to kind of give that sort of perfect noise canceling experience towards the listener. It kind of adjusts it to the listener's ears, their hairstyle and stuff of that nature, especially during the if you're on a flight, it compensates for the altitude. You can also use this to summon your Google Assistant if you have that set up. You can quickly press the power button to get your battery life indication. And you also get voice prompts. That's one thing that's pretty cool with the Sonys. You get that with the Bose as well. The Bowers and Wilkins, it gives you these kind of like beeps and chimes. You kind of get accustomed to what beeps and what chime means what, but it's not going to be as immediately intuitive as someone actually speaking to you and saying, hey, your battery is 60%. You get the idea. Feature-wise, Sony definitely takes the cake. Bowers and Wilkins do connect to two devices easier than the Sony, so that's one thing, as well as the ability for the Bowers and Wilkins to switch, pull USB-C audio from the USB-C jack, whereas the Sonys cannot do that. Bowers & Wilkins also has this feature where if you put the headphones on, it can detect that you're wearing them. It has a proximity sensor built into the ear cups. So if you remove the headphones, it'll pause the music, and after about 2 minutes or so of it not detecting your ears anymore, it will actually put the headphones into a standby. So you can kind of just put the headphones down and not worrying about it wasting the battery. It'll just turn itself off, and then the second you put the headphones back on, it'll power back on, kick on a noise active noise cancellation, and continue from where you left off. It does sound like an amazing feature when you describe the way it should work, but for me, I turned it off because it's sort of unreliable. Sometimes I'll be listening to my music and the proximity sensor will think that my ears are no longer there, and it will pause the music, and then it will detect my ears again and then resume playing the music, all while the headphone is still on my head. So it's pretty unreliable for me. When it does work, it is amazing, but I just ended up turning that feature off altogether. But feature-wise, Sony takes the cake. As for the sound quality, I would give the overall quality to the Bowers & Wilkins PX. I feel that the overall sound is more defined on the PX. It's a bit clearer. The balance, however, tonal balance, I would probably it's like a toss-up for me. I really like the tonal balance of either of these headphones, but it really just boils down to the focus in the bass, the clarity in the mid-range, the extension in the treble, the transient response, the separation between all those frequencies. The PX is definitely superior in that regards. The Sony, however, I do really like how these can be such a pleasurable listening experience because of the active noise cancellation being so effective. I don't have to really turn the volume up that much, as opposed to when I'm using the PX, I kind of do have to crank the volume on these to kind of compensate for their poor isolation, or more poorer isolation, because the isolation on these is pretty good, but compared to the Sonys, it's poor. Nearly anything compared to these is pretty poor in terms of isolation, because that's how well these block out noise. But because I can listen to the volume at a relatively low to moderate level, it feels like the sound is more natural sometimes with the Sonys, because I'm not really straining my ears, if you understand, to get that level of music in terms of the volume intensity with the PX. But overall, the quality is superior in the PX. The Sony's has a warmer profile. The bass is definitely more bloomy, and the mid-range is relatively even, relatively flat. There's not much traces of sibilance and harshness, which is what I love. Upper treble is relatively subdued. Lower treble has a peak, kind of brings back some of the liveliness in the music. In comparison, the PX has a rather boosted bass, particularly in the mid-bass region. So the bass on the PX sounds more punchy and visceral. Thankfully, the bass is also more controlled, so it really does have a nice punch. And when the music does call for, like, for example, like hip hop or EDM and dance tracks, drum and bass, stuff of that nature, the PX does really get visceral in terms of the bass punch and the attack in those regions. Moving over to the mid-range, I would say that the Sonys are probably a bit better balanced, but the PX has more clarity, so a lot of nuances in that specific region come out easily heard through the PX. The subtle layering and harmonics and the overall sense of depth and perception of someone actually singing towards you is better represented on the PX. Moving on to the treble response with the PX has a pretty lively treble. It's not really peaked. It's elevated throughout the low and mid treble, but it does also slope down in the upper treble and roll off, similar to how the Sonys are. But I kind of do like the smoother treble response of the PX, along with the better sense of clarity and detail. There's less graininess in that frequency as opposed to the Sonys. So the PX generally just has a clearer, more detailed sound, while the Sonys, if I would have to really pick and choose in terms of the frequency response, I would probably go with the Sony's tonal balance, but the PX's sound quality. So as a result, sound quality would have to go to the PX, because You can always adjust and fine tune some of those frequencies that you would rather change in terms of either boosting it or reducing it, but you can't really fine tune or adjust sound quality within an application. That's pretty much based off of the physical nature of the headphones, the quality of the speakers, the quality of the circuitry inside the headphones, and the tuning, the ear ups and stuff of that nature. That all dictates the sound quality. But PX definitely takes the win for sound quality. But overall, I would choose the Sony WH-1000Xm3 if I was recommending a wireless noise canceling headphones. These are the complete package. Battery life is excellent. Active noise cancellation is unsurpassed. Sound quality is great. Comfort, excellent. Feature set, you get everything you can possibly really need in a wireless headphone. Bluetooth codecs, I probably did miss that, so I'll cover that right now. The Sonys cover SBC, which is kind of standardized for all Bluetooth headphones and Bluetooth devices. You have AAC for iOS devices, which is also covered in the PX. You get aptX and aptX HD, which is also covered in the PX. But you also get Sony's LDAC, which is a very high bitrate transmission-based codec. So they both support all codecs, except the Sonys also support the LDAC codec. The only codec that is missing from the Sonys is the aptX low latency. The Bowers & Wilkins PX also does not support that. So overall, in terms of Bluetooth codecs, the Sony supports more codecs. So that has been my comparison of two pretty popular wireless noise canceling headphones. If there hasn't been anything answered in this comparison review, let me know in the comments below and I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. Thanks for watching this comparison review, guys. Later.